Hi, my friends. I do this work with all my heart for you. So please contribute generously to Future Primitive. Hi, my friends who listen to Future Primitive. Today, we're together with Rak Razam. Rak Razam is one of the world's leading experiential journalists, an author of the critically acclaimed book, Aya Awakenings, A Shamanic Odyssey, and a companion volume of interviews, The Ayahuasca Sessions. He is a frequent lecturer on ayahuasca and the shamanic revival sweeping the West. He wrote, produced, and co-directed the groundbreaking, new visionary documentary Aya Awakenings, and has been called one of the leading spokespersons for the new paradigm. Also on the line with us is Niles Heckman. He is a filmmaker and street photographer with a background in creating visuals for high-end commercials, games, cinematics, and Hollywood. He has overseen plate photography with New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers, 20th Century, Marvel Studios, and he is a member of 3 Academy Award winning teams shared between the animated feature and visual effects categories, and a Yes Award recipient for the outstanding achievement of virtual cinematography. His directing aims to cinematically portray content, oftentimes lensed in a candid street photography style. He directed and shot the plot episode of Shamans of the Global Village in 2015. And his future directorial debut for a documentary film entitled Transmutation that is due in 2017. And today we're especially interested in Shamans of the Global Village. Was that your idea, Rak, to do that?
Yeah, so thank you, Joanna. It's great to be on the show. As the bio sort of gave a bit of an overview, I stumbled into the world of plant medicines and shamanism, I guess actually through psychedelics, which is intimately connected. They're all sort of not necessarily interchangeable words. As you yourself know, Joanna, I'm sure there's a whole psychedelic community and culture and revolution that happened just a few generations back, and I think that really helped set the tone and lay the groundwork and the seedbed for this now current generation of Westerners that are exploring the shamanic dimensions and having that relationship with indigenous cultures and being the caretakers of these medicines from the planet herself. So I started off as a journalist in 2006, and I actually went to Albert Hofmann's 100th birthday party and symposium that was in Basel, Switzerland, and I was reporting on that for Australian media. And it sort of started my gonzo journalistic career on being what I called an experiential journalist, a bit safer way to say gonzo in the modern age that, my mother could understand because gonzo had all these connotations. But essentially it meant that I was really exploring consciousness and the psychedelic community and spirituality and technology and going, hands-on into the experience and not just reporting on it objectively from the outside. I really wanted to give an establishing sort of point of view that was like a traditional journalist but go into the experience itself. So the Basel, Switzerland conference and meeting Albert Hofmann was definitely life, but also my career, because it started me on this path. And that was in January 2006. And then by June 2006, my next assignment was to go down to the Amazon and explore the role of the mythic archetype of the shaman and what that meant in the 21st century and what that meant in the Western sort of paradigm and what this resurgence of interest in ayahuasca was. And so, that 3,000-word article became 2 books. The main one, Aya Awakenings, and then from that, a lot of the footage we had from that original journey in 2006, we made a documentary adaptation of the book as well. And interestingly enough, this is the way, things work. I was there for almost 3 months in 2006, and I sat with and interviewed and recorded sessions with almost 24 different curanderos or shamans, and really got an incredibly fresh snapshot at that time of what was happening both with this mythic archetype coming back into the West and this whole generation of Western seekers. And a lot of the language nowadays with ayahuasca is everywhere in popular culture and media. It's being reported on by, Time magazine and Marie Claire and Elle magazine, and everyone seems to be falling over themselves to report on this surge in interest. But at the time in 2006, it was just starting to peak in the mainstream back then, and it's been a phenomenon. And so what I really recognized was that the current language around it, still some mainstream periodicals will say it's about drug tourism, and they'll use these pejorative terms and this language which is all coloured by the war on drugs, and this, which is really a war on consciousness itself, what I really saw back then in 2006 was that these aren't drug tourists, these are seekers of the mystery, seekers of wanting to reconnect to something which Western culture has tried to sever, our connection to the planet, and then to these sacraments which she secretes, which then connect us to a larger bandwidth of information and of relationship and of coming home to the garden and coming home to this larger energetic ecology which we're embedded in and part of. And so, I saw that this was like a pilgrimage, and I documented that in the ayahuasca books. And then a week into my first journey, I was given the opportunity to sit with Ron Wheelock, who's a well-known figure around Iquitos in Peru. It's the gringo shaman, and he was working with 5-MeO-DMT from a synthetic source. It was legal at the time until 2009, when it was made illegal, at least in America. And he was working with a neuroscientist called Dr. Juana Costa, who was doing QEEG, this quantitative electroencephalography scans, or these brain scans. So you'd take the medicine while you were wired up to a computer with an EEG helmet, with 19 electrode caps on it and gel, and they would read your brain while you're fired into the mind of God. And of course, I don't think I ever recovered from that. It was the most incredible, amazing, transformative experience. And at the time, that set the tone. So it laid the seeds for my introduction to shamanic culture and also to consciousness and these deeper levels of exploration. And what I saw as I was writing up the book and working on the film, and over the years I've been involved with shamanic culture. I also lead retreats now in Peru. I'm going down in June this year. And I've stayed, in contact with the culture and with the coalface of doing this work with clients and exploring these dimensions. But what I've really seen is that there's a percentage of people that go down to places like Peru and engage with plant medicines, and then they keep on with the practice when they go home all over the world to their urban environments. And then there's an even smaller percentage of people who feel the call to action to become facilitators or neo-shamans themselves. And I saw this rising surge of interest and this supply and demand of the business of spirituality, I guess. And I realized that there was this global shamanic resurgence happening, and it was about this unification of old world, new world, east and west, and, a Westerners taking up and filling this void of the absence of the archetype of the shaman in our culture. And all of this has basically dovetailed into meeting my creative partner, Niles Heckman, here on the line with us now, and realizing that we could do a documentary series about this, and we could document this rise of interest of the global shamanic resurgence, and looking at, from the planet that secretes these entheogens, these sacred substances which alter our consciousness and plug us back into the web of life, and then looking at the role of the caretaker or the keeper of these substances, the shaman, and also specifically how Westerners are taking up this role and what it's meaning and what that archetype is doing coming back into our culture. So that's a pretty shorthand overview of the last 11 years of my career as a psychedelic and entheogenic documentarian and media maker, and maybe I'll let Niles run from there.
I would like to just say something before Niles comes in. You see, the way I see it is that after the two world wars, a lot of us realized that we were on the path to the planet, the people on the planet were on the path to self-destruction. And so starting with basically others, but Gordon Wasson making the link with Maria Sabina in Mexico and renewing the understanding that shamans and plant medicines, starting with that, we are on a path to something different than self-destruction, although it looks really bad now. And then there was the second generation, which was us, Timothy Leary, myself, and several other people who were brave, very brave explorers, and who found other shaman and others who were the same. And we opened this path where we must counter self-destruction. And you've come along with this beautiful visual and really honest and straightforward look at how we can let go of these self-destructive belief systems, and you show it very nakedly and beautifully in this first installment of your documentary. And I think it's very important that people see that truly the shamans and the medicines can help us change our mind from this planetary suicide. So Niles, it's time for me to invite you in and for you to tell us what is giving you passion for this documentary series.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I mean, that bio you read was certainly full of kind of accomplishments and accolades, which are a bit front-loaded, and kind of me doing a dance between a past career, to make kind of fake money in commerce, working in and out of the trenches of Hollywood, which is, of course, kind of an industry that is technologically quite stunning, but quite starved for content at the same time. And, as I spent about a decade working in it, just coming to eventually understand the lacking of empowering and kind of more philosophical content that is represented through the stories that you see, or lack thereof of what, authentic civilizations from the past might have been. So as I kind of worked more in the industry, documentary filmmaking really started to appeal to me just because of the authentic nature of it, and using some of my background working in various modalities of the commercial industry or the high-end, game industry in Los Angeles, going at the same time through a bunch of growth and development in my life, kind of spiritual growth, allowed me to kind of put my cosmology into more kind of conscious projects. So at some point, Rak and I kind of aligned stars, and this project was a bit born out of our kind of chemistry together in terms of his background with all the things that he just spoke of and his past, and then me kind of wanting to work on more conscious content. Mm-hmm. So this series, of which you've just mentioned, the first episode, is basically kind of the culmination of our two skill sets with, his kind of the content and experience that Rak has had a lot of time working in for the last over 10 years, and then my background kind of, doing the production values. So thanks for the nice words on the pilot, Joanna. It's very nice to hear. It's always nice to hear kind of people's feedback.
No, it's very clear and very, very open. It seemed to me that the people who were introduced to the gland secretion of the toads really, in our terms of our time, really blew their minds. And how was it on the other side? How was it on the other side?
Well, the documentary, which you can see at shamansoftheglobalvillage.com, it is raw. It is exactly what we experienced. And as the toad medicine, the Bufo alvarius medicine comes back into the Western understanding, it doesn't have an unbroken lineage with indigenous tribes. So Dr. Octavio Rettig, he did discover it and was introduced to it by other Mexican people in the culture. And, there's anecdotal usage. He has a sort of argument that he's positing that there's a lot of anthropological evidence and in different Mesoamerican cultures that you'd use toad, and it seems quite convincing that there was. But there's an unbroken lineage. So Octavio has a style that he's trained as a medical doctor. He went to work with the Seri tribe, who live they're one of the 13 tribes of the Sonoran Desert, neighbors to the Yaqui Indians who were made popular in the Carlos Castaneda novels. And the toad, it comes out during the monsoon season every year, which is around July, August, September, for about 2-3 months of the year. And so it's been a native to that area. And, presumably these cultures, they all know about the toad. We just don't know if they knew about the psychoactive use of its venom. And you have to smoke the venom as well. It's very important. It is a toxin. It is a venom and a poison, and it does need to be smoked. And when it's combusted, the scientific thinking is that it probably burns off the bufotenine poison and just leaves the 5-MeO remaining, which is, an incredibly powerful psychedelic compound. So the roundabout of this is Octavio worked with the Seri tribe in Sonora as a GP, and it's also in that territory in the north of Mexico. It's very sad, but it's like the Mexican drug cartels are putting a lot of their product through there to get to the border of America. And it's very poor people, indigenous people that have been put on these reserves by the government. And a lot of them were addicted to crack cocaine. It was like, they don't have a lot of basic services. There's no fresh water supplies there. And yet, a great majority of the community had a crack cocaine addiction. And Octavio himself is an ex-addict, so that's why he has that traditional wounded healer sort of archetype as his initiation into the shamanic realms. And he cured himself of his crack cocaine addiction by using the Bufo alvarius toad medicine. And he then introduced this medicine to the elders of the Seri tribe and helped, cure their addictions, and they saw the value of this medicine, and they've introduced it to other members of the tribe. In return, what they gave him was this shamanic lineage. Now, we've got to be very careful because there's a lot of different factions within, I guess, the Mexican shamanic scene, and as this medicine gets reintroduced, and people can be critical and say, look, the Seri didn't have an unbroken lineage, they never used this before Octavio, and that's completely true. But what they did have is a shamanic practice. When we went down in 2015 to film the documentary, we had the permission of the elders under the auspices of Octavio. Don Antonio, the chief of the Seri of the tribe, at the tribe at the time, came to our ceremony on Tiburon Island, the sacred island of the Seri, just off the coast. And so did Chapito, who is this 80-year-old shaman of the village. And what they did at the time is they sang their songs. And as we know in shamanic culture, or from my work at least in the Peruvian tradition, when they work with the Icaros, the medicine songs, these aren't just normal sort of recreational songs, These are vibrational codes, and these are things which draw upon their own lineage to connect to everyone who's sung them before and to invoke the power of the deities and the energies that the songs are about. And so Octavio was given permission to sing the songs and then to create a shamanic ceremony around the toad medicine. And this is completely new. It didn't exist before Octavio in that style. And Octavio is not saying that he's doing a Seri tradition which is thousands of years old either. He's very upfront saying he gave this medicine to the community, and in return they adopted him and they gave him the songs. So he does this medicine outside, and because his experience is to work with his medicine to cure addictions with his own experience in the village, that's sort of predominantly his energy. It's a very, very powerful yang warrior style. It's standing up, saluting the sun, being in the air, outside in nature, and Octavio gives sort of large doses of the medicine because what he wants to do is to ensure that there's a full breakthrough. And when this happens, there's been quite a lot of science been studying this phenomenon lately. The the 5-MeO basically on a neurochemical level will flatline the frontal lobes of the brain, the frontal cortex, and that sense of ego and identity is just totally obliterated. It's ego death. And some people resist this. Some people can resist this physically, somatically, as they feel they're integrating. And essentially, it's almost if watching people in ceremony, it's how they approach death, how they approach dying, and not physical dying, but the ego completely being dissolved. And as the Sufi poet Rumi says, the drop rejoins the ocean. And this experience is something we all go through eventually, one way or another. And the training of doing this, I think, is incredibly valuable as a spiritual tool to prepare ourselves for this eventuality, but also while we're here in life, to have a connection and to anchor these higher dimensional source realms to be closer to our experience, to have this modality. So Octavio's style is very shamanic. He sings the songs, and it invokes all that lineage. He uses water in the ceremony sometimes if people have trouble breathing, if they have an out-of-body experience, and the automatic reflexes of the body and the breathing aren't kicking in. He's pretty much the only practitioner I know of who uses water. Some people have been critical of that style as well. It's almost as if, for me, I see him as this very raw warrior style of initiation. And as the medicine has come into the Western practice, almost the same as what's happened with ayahuasca, the Peruvian, for instance, tradition of ayahuasca is drinking in the dark, with the songs, with the ceremony, with the ritual, but with curanderos or shamans that have been doing this for 20, 30 years. So many Western ayahuasca practitioners may only have a few years' experience. They may not have the song base or that knowledge of the songs. They may sing Western bhajans or kirtans or their own Western English songs. They'll create a very safe container in a Western ceremony, but in some senses it feels a bit diluted compared to an indigenous ceremony. And it's not better or worse, but I find with toad medicine it's the same. Practitioners of the medicine create their own container for it, and it's very different from Octavio's style. His style is tribal, raw, initiation, full breakthrough, drop rejoining the ocean into the source. And on a neurochemical level, what this does is the tryptamines cascade and the 5-MeO fully floods the brain. The ego death happens as you rejoin source. And it can be, if you learn to surrender, if you fully let go into the experience, incredibly like being plunged into the heart of the sun. And what the light really is love, is unconditional love. It's this frequency of love. When the prefrontal lobes go off and the prefrontal cortex, are flatlined, it seems to be, in my opinion, the other two brains kick in, the heart with the neuronal cells and the gut with the stomach instinct and intelligence. And there's some type of full bandwidth signal of consciousness that's always been broadcast, but the ego filter locks. When the ego goes down, we receive full signal, and that is the biggest healing, because we rejoin source, and then we come back from it. So it's an incredibly purgative on many levels experience, but it's also the ultimate medicine because it reconnects us to the divine within, like the ultimate antigen. And, it also then affects the physical body because the tryptamines cascade into the endocrine system, and they help flush and clear out toxins and blockages in the body, which is, I think, where Octavio's usage with addicts is really successful. It has a real boost of the immune system and helping flush things out. And so it's just the most incredibly powerful medicine, but it also needs the most incredibly sacred container to be experienced in. So that's essentially Octavio's tradition and Octavio's style. And we document this in the film going out to the Seri tribe and into the sacred ceremony in Tiburon Island. And you see quite a diversity of reactions to the medicine, of people having a very physical reaction, a very challenging, purging, a tetany sort of locking their arms in and holding on and not being able to release, or people dancing and channeling the energies they go through, or people just, completely knocked out by the medicine and then having to come back from this ego-dissolving experience. And it is very raw. It's very challenging documentary, but it's very, very real.
So I want to ask both of you, I don't know if Niles experienced the medicine, but I see you in the documentary experiencing the medicine. What are the changes you have experienced on the other side?
Well, I'll let Niles go first because he
I'll
has experience in medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually did experience the medicine, Joanna. Like Rak said, the show concludes in the ceremony on Shark Island, and we started in the kind of late afternoon and went into the evening. And I actually, as a person that's directing the show and shooting the show, when the camera stopped rolling and we got all the footage that we needed to get, I did take the medicine in a very kind of small dosage, which was very unusual and different than what my experience was. Very unusual and different than what's seen by everybody on screen. But because we're all such unique snowflakes, everybody's experience is different. And mine was a very kind of light dosage, small, short experience. It was probably only 5 or 10 minutes long, but it was still probably the most profound, life-changing thing I've ever gone through.
Wow.
So, and to add to that, I mean, that was like what Rak just, said, and, his yet another beautiful monologue by Rak Razam is that, a mystical experience is kind of, defined as like union with the divine. But there's nothing quite like this sacrament, which Rak has called, the star on top of the Christmas tree of entheogens, and Octavio in the episode calls the center of the X, in terms of the power and, severity of where this medicine takes you and what it brings. So it gives you a little bit of a quick preview into what might be considered a mystical experience, which, even if it's in a small dosage and however that's done, and everybody's so different however they get there, that rejoining of source is just such an amazing zoom out of the ego and allows for such mental wholeness. So obviously there's, you can talk about this sacrament from a healing process of people's physical healing, but then from a mental perspective, if you've done some work on yourself and development, kind of attainment in your life, and then you're, lucky enough maybe synchronistically to be exposed to this sacrament, which is like beyond a psychedelic experience, it's more an initiation into higher consciousness. I don't think there are any coincidences. So there's just, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
Very beautiful. And it was a life-changing time making the show, and then obviously just experiencing the medicine, and it kind of just catalyzed the reason why we were putting such hard work into a piece of media anyway, because here you are having the direct experience trying the actual sacrament, and we joke that the show would never be able to be insured because here's the host also taking the sacrament on screen. But it just goes to show that it's something that we're proud of having created, and the one thing that we can never show on screen is the kind of esoteric internal experience of somebody's psychedelic experience, or what might even be called a mystical experience. But we can only kind of show the physical person, having their external things happening, which if you don't have context on the ceremony at the end, is quite severe. And it's nice to kind of set up for that final scene, which I think is something that has never quite been filmed before.
But it really makes the point that there is help for healing, and there is help for healing in a very different way than we have approached it up till now, and also that this healing sacrament, as you call it, and I like that, comes from the earth and the other creatures, the non-human creatures. And that's a very important message that you communicate really well.
Yeah, and let me just lead into, I know what Rak will probably say to that, is that there's larger, I mean, we always kind of find with this, when you engage your will to act on some of these things, that there's larger energetics at play. And I think that, it's kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So, when you're ready for it and you've engaged yourself to experience something as powerful and stunning and life-changing as this sacrament, it's kind of like through synchronicity, it may, find you. And, Rak oftentimes speaks, and I'll let you take this away, dude, on the kind of larger energetics at work with how you've come about, finding these things with us getting kind of, I don't want to just say like how we say in the episode, like universal support for showcasing these things, but just kind of trying to share in a conscious way of kind of trying to honor the medicine and the sacrament and the toads, and just the, to look at everything from kind of an environmental perspective on, our Gaian mother, which is having so much of her struggles right now. Mm-hmm. But you want to go ahead and mention, dude, how you oftentimes talk about now is the time for the Gaian mother to release these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, it is a good segue. Thank you, Niles, for that little segue. And we just did a launch of the film in San Francisco last night, which was really wonderful. And we did it right on the Haight-Ashbury, right near the corner there. And it was beautiful to feel that, plus years after, or the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love is this year, 1967. But there's that continuity in culture of coming back into an experience of, it's not just altered states, it's expanded states, it's bandwidth, they're all out there. As we know, these aren't hallucinogenic distortions of perception and state. These are plugging back into frequencies of being which are permanently being radiated, and different frequencies of consciousness which all the different species are part of. And so what I really believe is that I have a little theory, because I started off in psychedelic culture as well, and I believe that there is a difference between psychedelic culture and entheogenic or shamanic culture. But so many of us straddle that gap that we're sort of in both cultures anyway. But I really believe that what came through in the lab with Albert Hoffman in 1943, when he went back to look at that 25th compound of LSD, right. And he said he had a strange presentiment, and in German the word was Vorgehal or something like that, and it meant more than maybe in the English. It sort of meant, he was guided to go back to this substance. And as we know, it's one, LSD-25 is one molecule different than LSA, which is the morning glory seed, right. The Lilliquai used by Mesoamerican tribes. And, basically by the 40s and by the end of World War II, that sort of white picket fence American mainstream consciousness, that linear consciousness, which Terence McKenna basically called dominator culture, it had won the war. It had won this pinnacle of human civilization. But look what we did with it. It's this legacy of history or his story that meant that first we separate from the earth, then we hide ourselves away in communities, we start agriculture, we start money, we start coming into an idea of past, present, future, we start hoarding, we start division and hierarchy, and basically these are all products of the ego. And we know that the ego is valuable, we need it to navigate down here in the baseline reality, but somewhere along the line it's started to get out of control. And I really believe that, so many cultures have these, and even in the sort of, the Christian and Judaic religions, they mention the fall of consciousness, and there's, we've had times when we've had an expanded bandwidth of consciousness. You look at my country, Australia, and the native Aborigines, and they say the dream time is essentially coming back. I've talked to, different mobs, and they say, yeah, bro, that's a season of consciousness. There's world ages, there's times. We had this capacity to connect to the web of life and to be more sort of telepathically open to that bandwidth, and then we lost it. There was a fall of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so, all these indigenous cultures have an understanding of cyclic time, and we're going through these world ages, and we've just completed this whole sort of, if you look at the Mayan calendricals with what we call 2012, we're now, 5 years into the start of a new cycle. And so much of these things are all paralleling and dovetailing. And so we had this psychedelic revolution, which was reintroducing LSD from the lab, but because there was no way we could connect to the garden, because we had spent 500 to 10,000 years killing our shamans and killing the witches and warlocks and medicine people and all of those who kept the connection to the entheogenic plants and to the portals that they take us through to. And, the pinnacle of that civilization, which was absent the shaman and absent the medicine person and absent the alchemist, it had Albert Hoffman, and he brought back through his alchemy in Basel, which is, was one of the capitals of alchemy around the Middle Ages, and it brought back through the lab in an incredible, huge way a sacrament that was used as it was used in the 60s, and it changed the course of history, and it dovetailed all these movements, all these isms of ecology and civil rights and consciousness, and it was the right time of consciousness, the season for that to come through. And then because of that, we've now had this psychic lubricant of LSD, which I believe has stretched the capacity of that mainstream dominated culture, which was very linear. And, Silicon Valley and the ground zero of the Haight-Ashbury in the 60s, now we live in an age which has helped birth all these technologies from and paralleling this psychic lubricant of LSD. We now have cloud computing and uploads, downloads, and social networks where 5,000 people at a glance on your screen, and VR and AR are coming in. And it's essentially distributed consciousness, which really is network-centric, and it mirrors what nature does. She works in networks. And LSD, switched so much on in the 40s, 50s, 60s and onwards. And then we had another ecstasy revolution in the 80s, which opened up the heart. And then by the time we come to the north, we've had some early adopters, but we actually have a whole generation of people who are then ready to go back to the jungles and back to the garden and to explore plant medicines. But we couldn't have got back to the jungle if we hadn't have gone through these previous revolutions of consciousness. So when we did the screening last night in the Haight-Ashbury, I was really just so happy to be anchoring our documentary about shamans of the global village and talking about the plant medicine and shamanic resurgence here in the epicenter of that psychedelic revolution, because I do believe that the Gaian matrix, like the intelligence of nature herself, it's like it's stepping stones. We've had the acid revolution, the ecstasy revolution, now the shamanic revolution, and they're all gradations over cultural time. But in the Gaian time, they're just like heartbeats. And so they're all just this evolutionary surge, not just moving us forward, but bringing us home and bringing us back to the garden and plugging us back into the web of life. And what we now know through scientific studies is that they've done EEG and MRI studies of psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD, and it turns off different regional clusters of the brain called the default mode network. And, it's not that these substances are having this psychic effect. It switches off the ego filter, which is stopping us from having this effect, this larger bandwidth of consciousness. And then we connect back to the web of life, and we connect to all these frequencies of being, which are always out there and that are accessible to us. And we're growing back into the planetary organism and coming back into right relationship. So even from ayahuasca being one of the predominant entheogens for the last 20 years or so in the Western intake, that's been cleansing people and healing people and revealing, that we are divine beings ourselves and we are our own medicine. And now, at the crux of, 20 years or more of ayahuasca usage and this shamanic resurgence, 5-MeO-DMT and the toad, Buffalo various toads, seemingly comes out of almost nowhere. It comes out of the deserts of Mexico in this Mexican drug cartel shoot-up sort of scenario. And it is the most potent entheogen on the planet because what it reveals is the divine source, is the white light, oceanic super union with what we really are. I mean, I'm going to say the word God, right? And a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people are still getting used to it. There's a lot of dogma around it. Whatever you call it, the source, the field, unified field, Indra's net, it is. It exists. It is what is. It is that which is. And it's not that we just witness this and see it from a distance. When we take the toad medicine on a full release, it strips away the ego and it reveals that has always been inside us. And it seems to be this stepping stone over cultural history with our relationships with psychedelics and entheogens is leading up to this apex of the tree of life and the light at the top of the tree, which is the 5-MeO experience. And the toad is essentially just a catalyst, just a reminder that we have this endogenously in our brains. And it's basically, I believe, it's saying, you are the medicine. And all this relationship from the psychedelic revolution to the shamanic revolution is crescendoing in our awareness that we can do this endogenously and we can come back to the garden and to the web of life and to connection with source. We can anchor dreamtime consciousness. I believe that this is happening in our generation, and this is the whole overview, the big picture of what's really happening in our relationship with Gaia.
And I'll just add to that, just as a brief addition, is that, with our kind of beautiful female host here, who's such a luminary of the community, Joanna, is that, we've been suffering from such a male-dominated patriarchal culture, which is, of course, a meltdown all around us with our, corporate corruption and, climate change and deplorable excuses for human beings in political office, moving us into this kind of more, I guess you could say it's almost forcing us to move into this more matriarchal, divine, feminine, dynamic of locality, from locality to kind of more universality and to move into more ritual and more ceremonial context of altered states as, we have this divine feminine returning, or more of a healthy balance of feminine and masculine, where it's about, you self-realizing and art coming more to the forefront. So this project is kind of our little tiny piece of helping push that in the right direction.
Yes.
As people maybe become less of a kind of pious dogmatist and more in terms of like, I guess maybe be a spiritualist as we move towards, we're forced to move to more authenticity.
Tell me, do you have women shaman you are going to approach for your next documentaries?
Yes. Do you want to speak to that, Rak? I mean, as we are very much still, we have a rough kind of outline for how we'd want to play a season, but do you want to kind of speak to that, too? Because we'd love to kind of balance it really well in the feminine and masculine dynamic.
Yeah, so, and this is sort of broad stroke stuff, but what I realized, a decade ago with my ayahuasca usage and being a commentator within ayahuasca culture and meeting the others was that there's a certain ratio of people who remain in the culture after their first ayahuasca experience and then a certain ratio that become practitioners themselves. And so there's such a blooming happening at the moment in shamanic culture across the West, and so many beautiful people heeding that call to action. Traditionally in shamanic cultures, there would be an initiatory sickness where basically, you go through a near-death experience or a rebirth experience or a sickness where you go right to the edge and you connect with the spirit world, and the spirit world's like, we're going to send you back and you're going to work on behalf of healing of your people. And we've got to remember, when we think of healers in the West, we think of doctors and the big pharma industry and this sort of commodified, modality. But in indigenous cultures, it's like a relationship, and you serve your village and your village serves you, and it's a more familial relationship they have, and it's a different approach to healing, because when you're keeping your village whole and healed, you're keeping the flow of energy, and you're keeping your society in equilibrium and keeping it happy and keeping it in balance with the earth. And this is exactly what global culture is out of balance with. We're facing the sixth great species extinction, where 97% of all biomass on the planet could die in a few generations.
Rak.
Yep.
Rak, who are you after all these ayahuasca experiences and these incredible toad experiences? Who are you?
I am another you, Joanna. It's as simple as that.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, what has it done for you? How is it illuminating your life? How is it? Tell me.
It has awakened like a little candle flame within my heart, and that flame flickers and it burns and it grows, and it threatens to meet other flames and create the biggest fire in the world. And it really is. It's, there's a certain amount of bravado and ego in the sense of making media about these things and getting up and talking about these things and putting out these theories. But essentially, I don't belabor it. I don't think about it. I feel it. I feel it from these experiences. And I understand that I'm being communicated to by source and by larger entities and allies that want us to come back into relationships. So all of this stuff I'm saying, this is what I feel and this is what I've experienced. Yeah. And, it comes from a place of love. It comes from a place where I recognize, where they say, in Lakesh, I recognize that space within you that is within me, in which we are both one. Because in the unity consciousness that the toad medicine shows us, I really feel it's like source does not differentiate between the petals on a flower. It's like the energy of source and the endogenousness of 5-MeO. We're not just all connected. We're like a 7 billion species flowering of the one thing coming through. And the more we open up and the more we support each other and nurture each other and feed and clothe and house each other, the more as a species we can come into group mind, which was the whole prankster thing back in the 60s. The core of the acid test was group mind. And that's what I feel is happening, especially with the toad medicine, whether we realize it as a culture or not. People get activated individually, but there are no individuals. And the more people who are activated, that endogenous 5-MeO frequency within them, when I'm around a group of other toad people, we resonate. We come into cohesion. We have these strange reactivations happening. It's total like Isaac Asimov childhood bend. It's like next level stuff happening that anchors beyond the peak experience. So who am I? I am you.
Okay.
Well, and to speak to that also, I mean, on my front, it's like any of these direct experiences just kind of do help show that interconnection, like Rak just highlighted. And I think oftentimes if you go into these things well developed on yourself with proper, mental development, it makes it so that when you have these experiences, it's less easy to accept the context of what's been provided to you by others outside of what you've directly experienced. So it's almost like you're less difficult. You're less easy to control, which I think leads to much more self-sufficiency and much more of a kind of empowering life. So when you look at something from kind of an egoic level, down here, and we're obviously in this, reality for a reason, if you just look at it materially, a lot of things seem pretty dreary. But when you look at them from kind of a soul level, which some of these experiences give you a little bit of a preview into, life gets much more challenging and exciting. And then when you look at things from a divine level, which is maybe where this medicine gives you a brief connection to in a short period of time, for just a little window of time, you get much more of a reconnection to spirit and to the magic again. So in terms of bringing that back into your life, I mean, it's like, it allows you to have so much more enriching empowerment along with your kind of fellow people that, maybe engage you with interest in some of these things.
Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, sweet men, good men, talk to us now. We're coming around here to the end, but I'd really like you to talk to us about your plan and what you need and what our listeners can do for you so that you can propagate this wonderful journey of bringing more light to shamanism.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and summarize kind of our
You go now.
okay.
You start and I'll ice the cake.
Yeah, sure. So basically this pilot, is something that Rak and I put together independently on a very low budget. So it's something that was done for less money than, a single day of a craft budget on a typical commercial shoot. So for something that was very cost effectively done, we kind of made happen, again, kind of in various interesting, unsuspecting ways how well things came together for us and worked out making it. But we shot it in 2015. So right now, and we completed it basically last year. So right now, currently, only the pilot episode exists, an hour long. And of course, the idea for the show is to focus each episode on a specific practitioner and a specific sacrament. So, like we mentioned, the first pilot episode features Octavio Redding and the Sonoran Desert Toad, the sacrament of which is 5-deoxy and dimethyltryptamine. So our kind of initial theory, or at least Rak's initial theory, was why not start with the kind of most, powerful sacrament from episode 1 and kind of launch from there.
Yep.
But that being said, this is intended to be an ongoing series, and as a documentary series that's being made independently, we definitely totally rely on community support of basically people. Essentially, the best thing you can do is share the show. And then, at the website, we'll always have the show available for download, and we have a rental option or a purchase option.
Excellent.
And we use those as kind of our basic donations to kind of continue to fund the next episode. And then, that's kind of probably combined with future crowdsource efforts. So that's kind of been the plan for it, and as we kind of continue to hopefully get from one episode to another on this set schedule, we can hopefully make it kind of a sustainable effort through those resources. So,
Yeah, so to also to finish off on your earlier questions, we do have some very powerful female shamans who we want to focus on, and there's probably 12 episodes. What we'd like to do, as Niles said, is look at the whole spectrum of the major entheogens around the planet, the keepers of those medicines, the shamans and shamanas, and their connection to the lineage of the indigenous people and to the planet. And so it is a big thing to do, a 12-part documentary series from scratch, relying on the community support, the shamanic community, psychedelic community, consciousness community, documentary community. And so we really rely on people to go to our website, www.shamanstheglobalvillage.com,
Right.
and to rent or download the episode and to share that with their friends and to put it out there. And that will enable us to make future episodes. So we're really excited to do that. And, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and we believe it takes a village to support a documentary TV show or online TV show like this. So please do help us by logging on and checking out the show and spreading it around to your networks.
Great. And when you listen to this conversation, go to your computer or go to the website and send it out to other people so they have a chance to stream or buy the show.
Yeah, and thank you, Joanna. Joanna, for having us and just kind of, doing your little part to share as well. So it's always nice to kind of connect up with other people that are on kind of a similar wavelength and get to chat to you directly. So that's one of the beautiful benefits of this show. Is not only was it lecture, the relationships and kind of fellowship built off of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I thank you both for offering this wonderful conversation.
It's been really great to chat with you, Joanna. Really beautiful.
Okay, Rak.
Thank you, Joanna.